Hello everyone and welcome to my channel YNR Trends. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. While the heart monitor continued its steady beeping rhythm, the atmosphere in the quiet, dimly lit hospital room that had been the focal point of his family's anxiety, fear, and prayer for the past few days was tense enough to break as Noah Newman slowly started to regain consciousness. Nick remained on his son's side, unable to take his eyes off Noah's face, silently pleading for him to wake up completely, while Victor Newman stood near the foot of the bed with his hands clutched securely behind him, an expression of steely control masking the emotions blazing behind his eyes. Tessa, weary from nights of crying and worrying, kept herself upright by clinging to the back of Noah's bed frame as if letting go would cause the world to fall apart, while Sharon, pale and shaken, sat in the chair at Noah's bedside, holding a small blanket in her hands as if she needed something to keep her together. After an excruciating silence, Noah opened his eyes and attempted to speak, causing his fingers to tremble, his eyelids to flap, and a soft but audible gasp to reverberate throughout the room. They had all been waiting for this moment, and while the machines did not sound an alert, there was a seismic shift in the room. Nick stepped forward right away, his voice shaking, saying, "Hey buddy, I'm present. All of us are present. You're all right." As if the world were slowly returning to him, memories layered over bewilderment, Noah blinked slowly, his eyes focusing and unfocusing as if the emotional weight of his parents' faces struck him first. On the way home, Sharon muttered his name as if in prayer. Unable to speak, Tessa leaned closer and let the tears fall silently down her cheeks. Victor, whose commanding presence served as a reminder that this was not just any family, this was the Newmans, and that nothing, especially trauma, stayed tiny here, was the one person whose response mattered the most and who Noah registered last. Noah swallowed severely after a long heavy pause, yet his words came slowly and haltingly, as though they were being pulled from deep beneath layers of shock. "Take your time," Nick gently urged him. "Simply take a breath." Noah needed them to know though, so he didn't want to wait. It wasn't an accident," he said in a weak, scratchy voice that was clear enough to send shivers down everyone's spine. Like she had turned to glass, Sharon froze. Tessa quickly put her palm to her mouth. Those were scary connotations, and Nick instinctively glanced at Victor with a harsh look. With a soft yet commanding voice, Victor went forward and said, "Noah, son, tell us what you recall, please." The road, the abrupt flash of headlights, the power of the crash, and then the shadowed figure standing there watching repeated in bits and pieces behind Noah's eyes as he took a deep breath, anguish blazing across his features. Noah trembled as he muttered, "I saw him." After the collision, he did not assist. He remained still. He desired it to occur. He desired for me to leave. Sharon appeared physically unwell. Nick's attitude changed from one of dread to one of white-hot protective wrath, and Tessa quietly sobbed. However, Victor's face took on a more serious, tough, and calculating look, since he had a feeling that there was more to this. From the minute Noah was discovered, he had a gut feeling. Noah now attested to it. "He talked to me," Noah added, gasping for air. "I wasn't supposed to be there. He informed me that everything was taking place as it should." Noah cautiously raised his gaze, studying each face as if to confirm something horrible, and then he forced himself to say the words that would break the delicate hush. "His name is Marcus." The room sank into a suffocating silence. The name was thick, venomous, and hung in the air like smoke. Every muscle in Victor's body tensed, as if the past had suddenly crept back into the present and put its hands around his throat. Victor was familiar with the name. Not as an outsider. Not by accident. Not as a gossip. He was aware that Marcus ought to have never again been in close proximity to his family. Sharon let out a start, knowing the name from snippets of a conversation Victor had once attempted to hide. Because Marcus was a ghost. A guy connected to a period of Newman history that Victor had spent years erasing. Nick's eyes widened in horror and bewilderment. Tessa glanced at everyone, confused and wanting to know what this meant, and why it seemed like Noah had uttered the devil's name. Victor remained motionless, silent, and unblinking. His eyes darkened, his jaw tensed, and his mask of control cracked just enough to reveal the truth, dread. Because Marcus wasn't merely an adversary. Not merely a competitor. Not only an error. Victor had once vanquished, buried, and vowed never to face Marcus again. A man who had promised retribution. A man who had vowed to hit the Newman family where it hurt the most one day. And because of him, Noah was now laying in a hospital bed. When Nick eventually broke the agonizing stillness, he said in a tight, scratchy voice, "Dad, what is he talking about? How did you come to know this man?" Victor took a while to respond. He had no idea how. Because the complete truth may destroy his family, Victor had kept the dangerous, strategic, and intensely personal history associated with the name Marcus hidden. However, the truth was now seeping into the present rather than merely resurfacing. Noah's voice quivered with intensity despite its weakness. "Your name, Dad." "Grandpa." That was the tipping point then. With a long sigh and a momentary closure of his eyelids, Victor gathered a conflict he believed he had already waged. And the tenderness was gone when he opened them once more. The captain was back. The defender. The titan. The man who would defend his blood by setting the globe on fire. "Marcus was a man I should have eliminated a long time ago," Victor finally muttered, his voice fading into something dark and unidentifiable. Sharon took a deep breath. Nick's gut twisted. Tessa shuddered. And Noah. With a fresh insight that frightened him, Noah observed his grandfather. Because an accident was no longer the issue here. It was war. Victor had just come to terms with the fact that he was no longer the hunter. They were hunting him. As if the walls themselves were absorbing the enormity of what Noah had just said, the atmosphere in the hospital room became heavy and oppressive, and the emotional hold on the Newman family became stronger with each second that went by. Victor remained motionless, his face unreadable, but beyond that meticulously manicured facade, a storm was brewing, one based on regret, unresolved conflicts, and the terrible realization that a ghost from his past had returned to haunt his family. Nick sensed that Victor's entire demeanor had shifted from one of parental concern to something much more sinister, something that had characterized Victor Newman's reputation in the boardroom and during the war. His determination to eliminate anyone who threatened to endanger his life. Noah, who was still weak and struggling to maintain consciousness, felt it too, but he had to finish and needed them to realize that this was no mere slight or personal resentment. Grounding himself, his eyes weary but determined, his palm trembling slightly as he grabbed for Nick's arm. Noah said in a hoarse whisper, he wasn't alone. And the realization struck the audience like a ton of bricks. Nick pushed in closer, his heart thumping in his ears. Tessa stumbled backward, and Sharon's breath froze in her throat. Victor's mouth tightened. His voice was low, controlled, and frightfully composed as he questioned, "Who else was there?" As memories surged to the surface, Noah swallowed, pain flashing across his features once more. "I heard a different voice, not close but close enough. Observing. Awaiting." In an attempt to stabilize the identity, the tone, and the sound, he closed his eyes. "It was a person who knew me. Someone familiar with my family. Someone who understood what would happen to all of you if you hurt me." Since she already had suspects in her mind, people who had sought retribution on the Newmans for years and whom she hoped would never return, Sharon instinctively reached out and ran her hand through Noah's hair in an attempt to ease the trauma, but her face had turned pale and her chest had been rising and falling unevenly. In the meantime, Tessa cried as she whispered Noah's name, afraid that forcing him to recall would make him feel worse but also afraid of not knowing. But Nick was gasping for air. His eyes were burning with a rage that only a father defending his child could comprehend, and his teeth were gritted. He pleaded, "Noah, just say it." But his voice trembled in anticipation of the response. Then Noah let out a slow, deliberate breath. "Claire," he mumbled. The room went cold. It seemed as if time itself faltered. Was Claire Grace, who had previously been accepted into the Newman orbit, pardoned, and thought to be recovering, now connected to this? As Sharon recalled all the warning signs she had dismissed as progress, her hand shot to her mouth and she let out a shocked, scared gasp. Tessa almost caught herself as she stumbled into the chair. Nick took a step back, disbelief and rage clashing forcefully as shock rushed through him. "No." Nick shook his head and mumbled. "No, she claimed to have finished all of that." "I want to move on," she replied. She expressed a desire to improve. Victor, though, didn't appear startled. He didn't recoil. He didn't blink at all. There was recognition instead, dismal, chilly recognition. For Victor had never believed stories of redemption. When someone had the ability to attack his family, He had always thought such ability would never go away. Victor murmured softly, his voice breaking like stone. I told all of you. That girl posed a threat. Sharon recoiled as remorse tore at her. She had stood up for Claire. She had had faith in her. She had dreamed of a way out of darkness for someone who had once been tricked into it. However, hope had misled them, and now Noah lay in a hospital bed. Noah's voice trailed off, but he was desperate to be heard. She was unwilling to do it. Not initially, he responded, looking into their faces. This wasn't part of the plan, I heard her say. That this was going too far. She didn't want anyone to be harmed. Tessa cried more and hid her mouth. Tears welled up in Sharon's eyes but refused to stop. Nick's stomach twisted, caught between fear, sympathy and betrayal. However, Victor shook his head slowly, his thoughts coming together more quickly than everyone else's. He stated, Marcus manipulated her. But it was more of a conclusion than a hunch. He has consistently exploited those who are weak, lonely, and yearn for acceptance. Sharon's eyes snapped up, recalling the innumerable tales of Marcus's cult-like attraction. Noah said. He promised her something. He assured her that his actions were motivated by justice, retaliation, and other goals. And until she saw the blood, she believed him. His voice broke, the memory of helplessness and terror still fresh in his mind. I caught her screaming. She wished to assist me. She made an effort. However, Marcus drew her away. With her shoulders shaking, Tessa broke down in tears. Something tore at Nick's chest. Sharon closed her eyes, heartbroken for Claire and Noah, and heartbroken that this family was continually being choked by trauma cycles. But at last Victor moved. He approached the window slowly and methodically, gazing out at the city skyline as if it were a battlefield he was already getting ready to take. With a strong, icy and authoritative voice, Victor declared, Marcus has come back to finish what he started. He wants to tear this family apart one by one. His goal is to shatter us from the inside out. Using Claire, he believes, will confuse us. Make us pause. Nick gave a violent shake of his head. I have no hesitation. He pursued my son. He raised his voice, causing the room to tremble. I will track him down. And I promise God that I will hold him accountable. Victor, however, turned and confronted his son's rage with even more vigor. With a voice like iron hitting steel, he replied, No. He wants you to do something out of anger. He wants you to be impetuous. He wins that way. Nick paused, panting. With his eyes blazing with controlled fury, Victor took a hesitant step forward. You are not the leader in this battle. My grandson was pursued by this man. A gloomy, menacing grin tugged at the corner of his mouth. I own him because of that. The coming of war caused a complete change in the room's power, not grief or dread. Knowing that there would be no turning back once Victor followed this route, Sharon glanced up at him. No legislation. No pardon. Just revenge. Even as fear shook beneath her skin, Tessa held Noah's hand securely, her love securing him. Nick swallowed, caught between the urge to do something and the knowledge that Victor was correct. They couldn't treat this enemy carelessly. Additionally, Noah, with a mixture of wonder and worry, Noah gazed at his grandfather, finally seeing why Victor Newman was so feared. Noah, however, murmured one final broken truth before anybody else could speak. There's more. Everyone immediately turned to face him. As the recollection pushed itself forward, Noah's pulse monitor spiked slightly and his breathing increased. Marcus stated that this was just the start. That plans were in place for the next strike. Sharon took hold of his hand. Breathe, Noah, my love. Noah nevertheless pushed the words out. The next target, he added, is someone we love even more. Quiet, chilly, heavy, immobilizing. Tessa gave a headshake. She coughed. Who? Noah's eyes were filled with anxiety as he glanced at Nick and then at Victor. He stated that he is pursuing Faith. Sharon let out a scream. Tessa let out a gasp. Nick froze, his entire body tensing up at once. Victor did not breathe either. For this was no longer about getting even. Retaliation was no longer the issue. Error correction was no longer the focus. War was declared. Victor's voice fell into a deadly tone. Therefore, Marcus has committed the most grave error of his life. Victor Newman then left the hospital room, Not to mourn, nor to reflect, not to get better, but to go hunting. Victor Newman strode out of the hospital with a determination that cut through the cold evening air like a blade, his footsteps echoing across the glossy floor as if the entire world should know to step out of his way, because this was not simply a man leaving a building, this was a father, a grandfather, and a titan preparing for war. His security detail flanked him instantly, sensing the shift in his energy, but Victor did not slow, did not blink, did not waste a single second, because Faith, his sweet, brave, innocent granddaughter, was now the target of a man who believed himself untouchable, and Victor had spent decades building an empire on proving men like that wrong. Nick rushed after him, fear and fury battling inside him, calling out, "Dad, let me come with you." But Victor stopped just long enough to turn and look his son in the eyes, and what Nick saw there wasn't rage. It was something colder, older, far more dangerous. Absolute resolve. "You will stay here with Noah," Victor said, voice controlled but willing to crack mountains. "Your son needs you. Your daughter needs you here. I will take care of Marcus." Nick hesitated, his instincts screaming to fight, to protect, to destroy the threat. But Victor's presence was a force, a reminder that sometimes the most powerful weapon in the world wasn't anger. It was experience. Nick exhaled, defeated but trusting, whispering, "Bring him back to us or make sure he never comes back at all." Victor merely nodded. A black SUV pulled up to the curb, its tinted windows sliding into place like armor. Michael Baldwin was already inside, summoned without a word, knowing exactly why he had been called. He studied Victor carefully as he slid into the back seat, noticing the unspoken shift, the return of the man the world feared. "Tell me everything we have on Marcus," Victor ordered, and Michael opened a folder thick with history, surveillance, psychological profiles, financial trails, and records of every silent move Marcus had made since disappearing. "He's been building something, Victor," Michael said grimly. "Connections. Influence. He didn't just come back to strike. He came back to dismantle you." Victor's expression did not change, but the air in the SUV tightened as though gravity itself had increased. "And now," Victor replied, voice low, quiet, lethal, "he has chosen the wrong family." The SUV sped through Genoa City as Victor's security operatives reported updates. Claire Grace was nowhere to be found, Marcus had gone underground, and traces of his network were surfacing in places Victor once believed sealed off. But Victor Newman did not panic. Victor Newman did not fear. Victor Newman prepared. He leaned back slowly, the city lights flickering across his face like fire. "If Marcus wants to come for my family," he said, closing the folder with deliberate calm, "then I will show him what happens when you declare war on a Newman."